Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Chamber's legislative wrap up, or this year, maybe our legislative update. This is our first blush at doing a Zoom actual webinar with a meeting like this. And I want to thank profusely our friends at CMC. They're helping to coordinate this whole thing. They're also going to live stream this. It should be live streamed right now on their website, Channel 19, and on their Facebook page. So these people are amazing. They're a major friend to all of us here in Carroll, and we can't thank them enough. Also want to thank our delegation for being flexible enough to do this with us, and for all of you to sign up at a last minute notice, because we just put this together as of recently. So hopefully everybody's doing well. It's a crazy time that we're living in right now, where we're bringing all the meetings where we used to love to get face to face onto a platform like this. But I think a lot of us are getting extremely used to it. I still yearn for the day where we can get together and say hi in person, maybe not shake hands immediately or hug, but we'll definitely get to the point where we can get back in the saddle, back into some of the meetings. But until then, we've got Zoom. So what can I tell you? We got Zoom and we've got our friends at CMC. So a few of the rules of our webinar. Make sure that you're muted. If you've now only joined us, keep yourself muted the whole time until we get to the actual Q&A point at the end. That goes for our delegation too. Everybody needs to stay muted unless you're the one speaking. We're going to let our delegation speak, give their updates, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at that point. If you have a question, as we're getting towards the end of our last person to speak, you can either raise your hand. There's a button where you can click to raise your hand, or in the chat box, you can type in your question there, and I'll try to monitor those as we go. So I would like to do the best I can. It's a little strange doing this here and not having this in a room where people can applaud, but we do have some elected officials with us on the actual webinar today, and I want to thank them for being here. These are at least people who've signed up on my sheet here, so whether they're there or not, I'm not certain. I can't see all the names. But as far as elected officials and or other people that we would normally recognize, we've got Dr. Jim Ball, president of Carroll Community College, got Marcia Herbert from the school board. We've got the past mayor of Tawnytown, James McCarron. We've got Delegate Jesse Pippy. We've got delegates Haven Shoemaker, Susan Krebs, April Rose. We've also got Senator Justin Reedy. We've got Commissioner Ed Rothstein, Judge Richard Titus, and City Councilman Ben Yingling. And I think I caught all the elected officials. If I didn't, I apologize. You'll have to forgive me. And we have a couple past chairs of the board of the chamber, Steve Aquino from Aquino Financial Group, and Ben Yingling from Crawford Yingling Insurance and Risk Management. So at this point, we're going to start to move into the actual program itself. And I want to introduce you to somebody who's extremely important to us here at the chamber. We have a lot of committees that do a lot of good work. And we have one that keeps an eye on legislative bills that are being introduced in Annapolis. So we do this on behalf of all of our members and, in all reality, all of the business community. And we've got about 15 folks on this committee. They meet somewhere from like the middle of January till the end of March. And we look at these letters and we write letters and we send them to our delegation to let them know what the business community is kind of, what's on their actual minds. Should we support a bill? Should we oppose a bill? And we have an amazing chair of that committee, Miss Dana Blum. And I'm going to turn things over to her right now. She's the backbone of all that we do in that group. So Dana, I'm going to have you join us.
Thank you. That was very nice. So yes, I would like to welcome everybody to our first and hopefully last virtual wrap-up meeting. And I'm hoping that everybody is well and stays safe and sane in these trying times. So we're going to get started in just a moment or two. I would like to quickly introduce the delegation who is with us today. So as Mike mentioned, we have Senator Justin Reedy. We have Delegate April Rose, Delegate Susan Krebs, and Delegate Haven Shoemaker. And I believe in just a moment, we are going to begin with Senator Reedy. Each of our delegation is going to give us kind of the highlights of a rather abbreviated session, although I'm sure it got pretty busy there toward the end. And hopefully they'll also give us an idea of what's next. And is there anything next for this year? or will everything roll over until next year? And again, just would like to remind all of you to keep yourself muted until we get to the Q&A section, and we'll go from there. So as of right now, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Reedy, and he'll get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you, Mike. Thanks so much for organizing this on pretty short notice. It's we're all dealing with this new reality, but I put on a sport coat for you all just for today. So that's how important you are. No, in my professional life, I do sort of sales and marketing and advertising, and we use Zoom a lot. So the Zoom folks are going to be making some serious money this year. They're one industry that's going to be doing well. So, but it's great that we can all be together. Thank you again for having us. I thought that what I would do is, we went into session really with kind of a couple of overarching issues facing us, and I'll talk about it from the Senate perspective. One big issue that was on the horizon for the entire state was the Kirwan Commission, the education recommendations. I'm not going to talk about that extensively because we have two of our members who were very intimately involved with that in their committee, and so I thought their perspective on it would be is certainly really important, and they can give a lot more detail than I probably can. But that issue of whether to expand spending by really almost $40 billion over the next 10 to 11 years was a major thing that going into session, we were all looking at. But also, as I think I spoke at the preview with the chamber, crime, the out of control crime that we were dealing with in the Baltimore area that was starting to bleed out, not just from the city, but into the Baltimore County and some of the other surrounding jurisdictions. That was a huge issue. I serve on the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, which every legislator serves on one standing committee, and that's the one I'm on. We deal, of course, as it sounds like, with judicial criminal justice issues, firearms, a lot of social issues, and the courts in general. And we have some other issues in our portfolio that are business related as well, like liability issues. But certainly crime was a major issue, and it really still is. I mean, there's still significant crime happening. It's been, I think, muted somewhat by some of these requirements to stay indoors, but Baltimore still has a lot of violence that we're dealing with. And so my focus is, when I'm going into session, we're on the fiscal side. I think we need to actually be looking more at tax relief and reducing the cost of living burden in Maryland. We need to keep our state budget. I felt like we needed to keep our state budget and spending under control. And that in the auspices of looking at Kirwan, I thought it was going to be important that we keep those fiscally conservative principles front and center while we looked at what to do about education. I also wanted to focus on protecting and expanding Second Amendment rights, because folks are nervous. They want to be able to. Maryland has made it very difficult for law-abiding citizens to purchase and own firearms and practice their Second Amendment rights, and that's an issue that comes in front of my committee quite frequently. And then also, as I said, cracking down on crime in Baltimore and really making the entire state safer. And unfortunately, the priorities of the liberal establishment in Annapolis were not that, or ran counter to that. And there was a huge push for even more gun control than we've had in previous years. We already are one of the most restrictive states on firearms in the country. That has not stopped gun violence. In fact, gun violence has gotten far worse in the years since we've passed major gun control legislation. But yet the folks in Annapolis that represent some of these communities keep coming back for more and more. And there was also, during the time we were down there, massive tax increase proposals, including one really absurd proposal to apply the sales tax to services. Which I know many of you were engaged in that fight, that was, an outrageous sort of idea that we would totally upend the economy by taxing all sorts of services, from haircuts to funeral services. And so fortunately that was defeated, but some other tax increases were pushed and did get through. Another major issue that came in front of my committee that I think is relevant to how we look at public safety is trying to make Maryland a sanctuary state. Saying that law enforcement in Maryland, that no one can cooperate with federal immigration authorities or federal law enforcement. So those were all proposals that were pushed. Some of them passed and some of them did not. We did, as I said, defeated the massive sales tax expansion, but they did dramatically increase tobacco and vaping taxes and taxes on digital. They created a new tax on digital downloads, which I think is those bills have not yet been signed or vetoed by the governor. I hope he'll veto them. But in this time period of uncertainty and real crisis for our state, even towards the very end of session, they were pushing to pass some of these major tax increases and also pushing to pass things that don't make us any safer, like sanctuary state policies, which fortunately the bill to actually make Maryland a sanctuary state ran out of time. They did a couple things around the edges that I did not support that were sort of less than that, but they did not get the full sanctuary state legislation through. But really, truly, what we saw in the final, we had 72 days of session. Normally it's 90 days. We probably could have been done at about 67 or 68 and had the budgets passed and the things that we needed to get passed done. But they kept sort of holding it and holding it and holding it and taking longer and longer. And about 600 bills in the last few days were rammed through for final passage, many of which had hearings and had extensive debate, but a lot of which had not. And so it's the old never let a crisis go to waste that we saw during the Obama years, President Obama. That was sort of a mantra they went by: don't let a crisis go to waste. And that's kind of what we saw this session. As I said, some things didn't make it. A plastic bag basically ban and paper bag tax, that failed in the Senate. It did make it through the House, but it failed in the Senate. I mean, can you imagine if they had passed that and in the current crisis that we're in now, you didn't have plastic bags. So we saw this it was what I feared in the session in many ways, a grab bag of sort of outdated, sort of progressive ideas that don't make us safer, make it harder to do business, make it more expensive to live here. And then they really didn't slow down much once this COVID-19 crisis broke. They still tried to get a lot of that stuff through. Thankfully, they ran out of time and we were able to defeat some things. They still rammed through Kerwin, which there were, in my opinion, lots of opportunities to compromise and do something positive to increase spending on education, but do it in a targeted way. And again, I said I'd let my colleagues talk about that. I wouldn't get into it, and now I'm getting into it. But so for me, it was a frustrating end of session in that it was positive that we defeated some things, but there was still this push to do a lot of sort of out there progressive policies that I don't think are where most Marylanders are, and they're certainly not helpful in a crisis. So as a state, it's hard to think about anything business related right now, other than just how the impact of COVID-19 is impacting your business and many of our businesses that we're involved in. But whether it's tax increases or committing Maryland to a major expansion of spending over the next 10 years, there were some really bad decisions made that we fought against. We tried to present alternatives, and in some cases we were successful, as I said, in defeating some things. But in many cases, there was bills that made it through in the final days of the abbreviated session. I look forward to answering questions from folks and talking more about some of the current things we're dealing with as well. But again, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to address everybody, and look forward to talking more as we move forward.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you to our participants for remaining muted. That's very helpful. And we'll move on to Delegate Rose, if you would like to give us your thoughts.
Well, hi, everyone. And yes, this is really a strange way to do business, but I appreciate the chamber and Richard for CMC for putting this together. It is nice to see everyone's faces, and at least we're able to communicate in this way. I'm going to not steal, but I'm going to give my thoughts on it. And I think Susan's quote in the paper, I think was probably the best one. The way that they ended session was really an embarrassment. We're in a crisis, and as Justin mentioned, they jammed through 650 or more bills many of which I don't feel had proper hearings. One was there's going to be on the referendum, if the governor lets it proceed, a referendum. In fact, I think it has to, about changing the way we do the budget and taking away the governor's control over some parts of the budget. And, that really, in my opinion, did not have a proper hearing, especially on the House side. I believe it did maybe on the Senate, and I'll defer to Justin if that was the case. And so that's going to be on the ballot in November. And why we need to do this at the last minute in that kind of fashion, without the public there, without very good video, audio, so that the public could have access to that, I think is shameful. There were what I would call absolutely silly, ridiculous bills that actually got read out onto the floor. One resolution dealing with the FIFA games, soccer games in 2025, basically a resolution that why that's important under such circumstances is just beyond me. And one officially recognizing DC, that we would agree with DC having statehood. And again, a resolution not necessary under those circumstances. We should have focused on what we needed to get done, the budget, and things of that nature, and finished. So it was extremely frustrating, long hours, and a lot of emotions going on with everyone. With Kerwin, touching on Kerwin, I'm sure Delegate Shoemaker would agree with me. This entire session, as we mentioned back in January, it was all Kerwin all the time. It really just dominated most of what we did in Ways and Means. And as I have said before, and I'll continue to say, and I said on the House floor as well, just because you vote against that bill with that cost doesn't mean you don't care about education or children. There were 5 major policy issues jammed into one giant bill, which at the final end of it was moving up to almost 400 pages. And there are a lot of great things that we could do with education that would not cost billions of dollars. And when we finally got that bill to vote on, our world as we know it changed drastically. And no one in that room who voted for that bill had any idea of what the economical impact was going to be of this virus on our state and our counties and our cities. And to vote on that and rush it through at the end, I just feel was very fiscally irresponsible. I think we can go back and look at that bill and pull parts of it out and do things that make sense. Let's look at what we're doing here today. And, bills that I have sponsored year after year about computer education and things like that, I did get that through the House side. This is extremely valuable now. All of our kids should be able to get that kind of education because now everyone is online learning as best they can. And we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know what's going to happen with our schools. I know I get constituents emailing, Facebooking me, wondering, what are we going to do? When are we going to open? How are we going to open? And if this is something which clearly we may have to deal with for a while, computer education to me is extremely important. So there were parts of that in Kerwin, and I have praised that in the past. And so I think we can go back and look at this big, giant bill, pull things out that are not expensive, and do what makes sense to best serve our children for this current time, for their futures, and for future careers. So, obviously, I did vote against it, and I voted against it for those reasons. But again, I reject the notion that was stated over and over again by our friends on the other side of the aisle that, basically shame on us if we didn't vote for this bill because of the children. I do care about kids, and I think that we all do. I think everybody in that room did or does. So that's what I'll say about Kerwin. One other bill that we got through in Ways and Means that was another important bill, actually even more so important moving forward, was sports betting. And whatever your feelings are about gambling, pro or con, but that is something that if we open that up to our current, casinos, which of course are closed at the moment, but moving forward, that's something that would bring in some additional revenue to the state by allowing that to occur. That will also be on the ballot. What we had to do is pass it first. And then next year when we go back, we will hash out the details of exactly how that is going to work. And that is something that I know Marcia Herbert was on here. So that's something that is actually very important to our horse industry as well, because we want to be able to bring that to the off-track betting places, and that will help bring business to them and help our horse industry. So those are some of the things. Just in generalities, I think that moving forward, I'm glad that I heard the governor say that he is not going to allow any of the bills that are going to cost additional money to the state to move forward. And I think that's extremely important. I think in these circumstances, it is absolutely critical that we not raise one more fee, one more tax, not one more thing to harm our businesses who are suffering. And I'll just end with something that is very important to me. And I think that we have gotten to the point in time where we absolutely need to move forward with a plan of reopening our businesses, get people back to work, get people off unemployment, and start to move forward. It can be, I don't have all the answers. However, I think when you look at the rural areas, that there is absolutely no reason whatsoever that we cannot come up with a regional approach to reopen, doing it in a sensible and safe way. But our businesses are hurting. I hear from them constantly, and I try to get their questions answered as best I can. But I'm very, very concerned about the business community and getting our people back to work. This is not sustainable the way it is. And I really do think, especially in the rural areas, with the exception of the very tragic and unfortunate circumstance at the nursing home in Mount Airy and then a couple of our other nursing homes, we have had really relatively few cases. And that's the case on the Eastern Shore. The rural areas could certainly find a very smart, careful way to move down that path. And that is really what I am mostly focused on right now. I do look forward to answering your questions. I appreciate all the hard work you do as our small business community. I know this is difficult. And, I have sent out many emails with links, and the chamber has done a fantastic job of letting everyone know about programs available at the state level, the local level, and at the national level. So if anyone needs any of that information ever sent to them again, feel free to reach out to me, and I will be happy to get you whatever answers that I am able to. And I appreciate the time. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And next up, we will hear from Delegate Susan Krebs. Thank you.
My new computer and my technical difficulties. So it's glad to be with you. And I really have missed our annual get-together luncheon, because it really was a time of spring renewal and getting out of Annapolis and getting back to normalcy in Carroll County. So I missed that, and thank you for putting this on. When we came into session this year, it was a very unusual situation. We had a lot of changes over the last year in the body of the legislature. As you know, when we left last year, we had a lot of corruption issues. We had people resign. Some of our former members went to jail. So we've had some turnover, some health issues. So we have a lot of new folks in the General Assembly, especially in the House, and some of the House members have moved to the Senate. So a change in the body. I serve on the Health and Government Operations Committee. And again, when we came in January, we had a very prosperous economy, very prosperous. I mean, everyone was feeling great. Money was coming in. Businesses were feeling good. So in those few months, we had a huge change in just our mindset of what we were about to do. And as Delegate Rose mentioned, Kerwin was the 90-pound gorilla in a time when we thought revenues were coming in very generously. And even in that environment of generous revenue coming in, we still did not have any way to pay for this huge piece of legislation. There were also a number of other pieces of large legislation that cost a lot of money. Won't get into the details of them all, but one was dealing with Pimlico Racetrack. One was dealing with historically Black colleges, that we passed a bill that spends $580 million over the next 10 years funding historically Black colleges, a lawsuit that's been going on forever, huge amounts of money. We also passed a large school construction bill that everyone was on board with, to billions of new dollars for school construction for projects throughout the state. That passed. It was called Build to Learn. So things were looking good when we started session. I serve on the Health and Government Operations Committee, and we were dealing with some big issues. One is access to affordable prescription drugs, which has been a problem for a long time. We also were dealing with prescription shortages, drug shortages in certain types of prescriptions, and that's been exacerbated by this pandemic. So those are issues we were working on in our committee, Health and Government Operations. We also have been working for a couple of years and passed major legislation this year that was very timely, having to do with telehealth, which I don't know how we do without it currently, but being able to allow doctors and licensees to be able to practice online while you're in your home or somewhere else. And major legislation passed, and the governor actually signed that emergency bill into law so that we would have what we need today to handle this pandemic. We also dealt with the state of emergency. We had to pass emergency legislation at the last minute to allow the governor to do some of the things that he's doing with regard with public health, and also some of the actions on unemployment, giving him the ability to streamline the unemployment guidelines without going through the legislature to allow more people to have access to it. I know it's still not getting through the computer systems, but at least people have the eligibility to be able to collect unemployment way more broad than it used to be. We also have worked very hard this session to protect our local pharmacies, which were being strained with some of the big pharmacy benefit managers. We want to make sure we protect our local pharmacies because they're on the front line many times with delivering to our local communities. So we wanted to make sure that they had the ability to operate. We also have done some common sense expansion of what they call scope of practice for our healthcare practitioners to make sure that every healthcare practitioner can operate and can work with the full extent of their training, because there's sometimes a lot of regulations put on these healthcare providers that limit them artificially. So we've been trying to make sure that all healthcare providers can really do work and do the job that they're trained to do. We also have expanded mental health programs and outreach for substance abuse disorders. We haven't talked much about that, but we have a huge drug problem in our state and in our country and in our communities. So we've done a lot with expanding access to those mental health and substance use programs. We put the registry together, and we've also established emergency facilities both here in Carroll County and in the state for those issues. So we literally were, as Senator Rita was mentioning, things were going along pretty well, and then all of a sudden, this pandemic started coming up, and no one really knew what was going on. So the governor sort of became distracted with that, which he should have been. I mean, he was right on it. He was first out there, and so we were passing hundreds of bills without the governor really having the ability to weigh in, because he was very much focused on the pandemic and trying to position the state of Maryland. And as Delegate Rose mentioned, 660 bills passed in the last 3 days of session, 660 pieces of legislation. I will tell you honestly that all of us, half the time you didn't even hardly know what you were voting on, because it was going like every 10 seconds a new bill was coming up, and it was very difficult to even keep track of what was going on. It was ridiculous. For the first time ever, our House proceedings were recorded live stream, which was a good thing. Since the public was not allowed in the buildings for the last couple of weeks of session, they were banned from the buildings. We had no staff, so we were literally just the legislature. The legislators were allowed in the buildings, and no help. So 660 some bills passed in the last 3 days. We worked 3 weeks straight. We worked first time we worked a Sunday, and anyone can ever remember. We had a session, but we were passing all these bills as the governor was dealing with this crisis. And the bills were presented to the governor on April the 7th. So we ended 3 weeks early. They waited to present the bills. They were presented last week to the governor, and he's got 30 days to either veto, sign the bills, or let them go into law without his signature. He has said he has not even had a chance to look at those bills. Some of them are good. Some are totally unnecessary right now, and some of them are really problematic. Many of them are problematic. Many of them have very large fiscal notes. So he need to know that by May the 7th, he will have made a decision. We were already told before we left session to prepare for a special session. And at the end of May, they gave us dates to come back. And at that point when we left, it really was about overriding the vetoes of the governor, because they knew he was going to, they foresaw that he was going to veto, especially the Kerwin legislation, because he's been threatening that. So we already have dates on our calendar, supposedly, as we left, to come back in May to take care of business, as they call it. I was looking at the calendar today and realizing that it wasn't just a month ago that we were there. Today's the 15th of April, tax day, and we did not adjourn until the 18th of March. So it just seems like an eternity. It seems like another lifetime away when we were there. So we may come back for the special session. We may not. I'm not sure what that's going to bring. But I think all of us are very frustrated in our daily lives, all of us. As we sit here, you look at it this beautiful day, and you look at it, the trees are blooming and the sun is out. But there is a lot of hardship going on in our county and across the country. And our facilities, our healthcare facilities, our hospitals, it's a whole other world out there. So we've got to hold those people in our thoughts and prayers. That those are on the front lines. But we're very hopeful that some of these, some more normality will come sooner than later. Today at 2:30, Governor Hogan is holding a press conference to discuss the next phase of COVID. Where are we in the state of Maryland with this pandemic, and how we can work together to loosen these restrictions. And I just want to say, the president has said, and the governor has said, we're all in this together. There's no one person, the president or the governors, or there's no one person other than maybe God that can help us through this. So we all have to work and say, what can we do as we reopen so that we don't have a recurrence of this pandemic again? We want to get through it once and for all. We don't want just a temporary law and to come back and have issues again. So in Maryland, we have still not reached the plateau, I guess they call it. I think we're close to it. We've had some major problems in some of our healthcare facilities that keep being exacerbated. The young people in Maryland have not been immune from this, and we need to make sure that they realize this. I do look around and see so many people doing so many good things and really taking this seriously. There are some that don't follow the rules. Keep in mind, this has hurt the healthcare industry as well. You think, gosh, all these healthcare providers are out there taking care of COVID, but many in our healthcare industry as well, their offices are shuttered. Depending on what industry you're in with the healthcare, dentists are closed. Many practitioners are shuttered in that industry. They can't practice. In the future, I believe that every business should be thinking now, if I open, what will that look like? Every business will need to have a social distancing plan, the social hygiene plan, or else we're going to be back to square one. And I don't think we're not going to, as they've said, flip a light switch and get back on track. Governor Hogan has a really tough job in trying to keep us solvent through this crisis. And he started off this year. He started off by having a very healthy rainy day fund, and he has been a big advocate for having a healthy rainy day fund since his first days in office, and that has really helped us maybe be able to get through this. He's also talked constantly about these mandated spending bills that keep coming up for over and over again. But we need to have a very sobering conversation about the economic impact if these restrictions are not canceled sooner than later. Comptroller Francho last week put out a report basically talking about the impact of these restrictions if they last through June. And I think it's a great barometer to say, my gosh, how are we going to deal with this? He basically said if we have the stay-at-home order in place through the end of June, the fiscal impact on this year that we're in, the current budget year, there's 2 months left, the fiscal impact to the state of Maryland would be $2.8 billion. That is huge. That means we would have to cut $2.8 billion out of our current budget of the year we're in the last 2 months, just to have a balanced budget. And that is very sobering. That doesn't even count next year and where we seem to be. So I think that really makes us all understand we've got to get back to business sooner than later. What can we allow? So hopefully the governor will be discussing that during the press conference today. As you all know, the job loss in the country and in Maryland is unprecedented. It is huge. In just 3 weeks, over 240,000 Marylanders have filed for unemployment, and that's the people that could get through. If you filed for unemployment or any of these programs, the CARES program, please keep up, keep trying. They're adding hundreds of new workers on the front lines to handle some of these unemployment claims. They've been overwhelmed everywhere with their systems, but just keep on trying. They will pay people back from day one of when they were unemployed. So keep trying. The money is there. At least it should be there. And these numbers do not even count the people that are technically still employed but are underemployed. They're not making the salaries they used to make or the wages. And it doesn't count the people that have stopped trying looking for work. So we really are in a huge crisis. The tax deadlines for state, local, federal have all been delayed till July the 15th, which is a good thing. So I would suggest using that for working capital. If you have estimated payments, just hang on to them and use that for working capital. The money from the CARES Act for individuals, the $1,200 per person, should be arriving. I believe they're starting some this week, I think some today. So in the next couple of weeks, people should see some relief individually, depending on what salaries you made. But if you're looking for information, most information that you can get that we even can get is available on these websites that are being updated continuously. One is maryland.gov/coronavirus.business. It's the governor's website. It has many frequently answered questions, many links to the different opportunities that are out there. There's also information on the comptroller's website. Just Google it, you'll see it, and it's changing every single day. And we almost have to refer back to those websites ourselves to try to get answers too. It is, as I said, it is very, very complicated, the numbers of programs that are out there to tap into, but you have to be your own advocate and you've got to do your homework and see, what you may be eligible for, you or your business. Marylanders do need to get back to work. I think we all see that and we agree. As I mentioned before, what can businesses do now? They need to plan for a modified reopening. Every business is different and unique. So social distancing will need to continue for the foreseeable future, as far as I can say. I think following the stay-at-home orders as much as we can until they're lifted, if possible, will help us to change that curve and bring it down to nothing. And following consistent hygiene practices and protocols, I think for forever, eternity, we're going to be following things like that, whether it's handshaking, hand washing, just being social distancing and being cautious. I also just want to take a minute to acknowledge the work that's been done in our community. It's just incredible how people have stepped up to the plate. I look at our school, first of all, our hospital, Carroll Hospital, in the last couple of weeks have just ramped up our Carroll Hospice. We still have people that are ill and are passing, and it's a very difficult time for families because they can't be with loved ones. So those institutions have stepped up and they keep going to work every single day, the doctors, the nurses, and all the support staff. Our long-term care facilities are having unimaginable problems with housing very difficult patients. Some are very ill, some have Alzheimer's, elderly, and it has become difficult in our long-term care facilities. So I think we're going to find some opportunities for improvements as we look back on this next year and say, how do we better serve in another situation like this? And I also want to mention, I know Marcia Herbert's on the phone, and Jim Ball with the community college. Our schools, our public schools have really stepped up to the plate with the online learning. They were moving in that direction to begin with, and now they are really, our teachers and are trying to get information to our children so they can continue to learn. But that leads to another issue that I know that the commissioners are working on. We don't have broadband everywhere in our county for this to occur. And for both families and for businesses, everyone has to have broadband. So that will be a huge priority, I believe, around the nation, especially in Carroll County, to make sure that every person, every home, and every business has access to broadband, so that everyone has equal opportunity to learn and get the information that they need. Also, we got to look at our first responders have done a phenomenal job. Our sheriff, our health department especially, and our EMS. And the other thing that our community has done in our small businesses is stepping up to the plate in many, many ways. Seeing an opportunity and not being told to do it, but just to take that opportunity, and whether it's delivering food, making masks, making face shields, people are just stepping up and taking the initiative and doing what they see that needs to be done. And many people say to me, what can we do? No one can tell you. Just call a neighbor, help a small business. I mean, we've been trying to carry out from some of our restaurants, our local restaurants, so they stay in business just a little bit. So every one of those little things help. So thank you all for doing this. And the questions that we're going to have come up are, what are our immediate difficulties and what are our recoveries to come? And I think we're finally having the conversation in the next week or so of what does recovery look like and how do we move that forward. So thank you all, and in this unprecedented time, and pray for you all, and thanks for having us.
And well said. And so now we're going to hear from Delegate Shoemaker, please.
I think I'm unmuted now. Let's see. So, can you see me?
Not yet. If you could if you've got your video, you can start video.
There we go. I just gotta.
We can see you now.
Okay, good. So, I mean, I think everything that possibly could be said about the General Assembly session and the ongoing health crisis has been stated. I want to thank the Chamber and the CMC for affording me the opportunity to put a tie on. I haven't had a tie on since we got out of session on March 18th. I practice law for a living, and courts are closed, and apparently they will be until June 5th at the earliest. And when courts are closed, my phone doesn't ring. So, I certainly empathize with a lot of our business folks out there who are suffering from this, through this crisis that's really unprecedented. So I understand completely where folks are coming from right now. I got to tell you, in all candor, the legislative session was really it was an unmitigated train wreck. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. The Kerwin boondoggle, I raised my concerns about that mess when the Chamber had its pre-session event first week in January. The size of that boondoggle only got larger as we went through session. I think at the end of the day, it wound up being essentially a $35 billion package that was passed after it. Well, I mean, it came through the House on March the 10th. And went over to the Senate and came back to the House like a day or two before the end of session. We adjourned on the 18th. And as we were about to adjourn, and as that bill was coming back over to the House, the economy of the state, many of our businesses, was shutting down. So passing that massive, mammoth spending package was akin to, you know, fiddling while Rome burned all around us. And that's exactly what happened with Kerwin. I strongly suspect the governor's going to veto Kerwin. I think he's going to veto a number of the things that had fiscal notes attached to them that we passed on the last couple of days of session, 650 bills without the benefit of public input, which was extremely frustrating and sad. There were some tax hikes that were passed with an eye towards funding Kerwin, or at least putting some money towards it. They never passed enough to actually fund Kerwin. They were going to kick the can down the road and let other legislators and other governors figure that mess out. But they did pass some tax hikes. I think Senator Reedy alluded to those. I hope that they get vetoed as well, because you know, we're in a recession. We may slide into something worse, God forbid, but it could happen. And this is absolutely the wrong time to either be passing massive spending plans or tax hikes of any kind whatsoever. The senator alluded to the fact that, and I don't think anybody's going to accuse me of being a starry-eyed optimist, but a couple good things did happen insofar as that the crazy sales tax bill that would have imposed the sales tax obligation for services. Well, at least that went up in smoke, but there were a couple smaller tax hikes that did make their way through, including tobacco and digital downloads and things of that nature that the senator alluded to. So I don't see how anyone can really glean anything particularly positive from the 70-some days we were in session. Keep in mind that this was the first session to end early since the Civil War. So it's really uncharted territory. You know, even though the circumstances surrounding our getting out of Dodge early were certainly tragic, at least it stopped us from doing any more damage to the citizens of Maryland. So anyway, that's my synopsis of the session, and I'm looking forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And right before we jump into questions, when I'll bring Dana back, I wanted to give you a quick update on how you ask the questions again. If you look on your page of Zoom and go down to where it says participants, if you click on that, I think the bottom right, there's an area where it will say raise hand. And you can raise your hand just by clicking the button. That's the easiest way. And then once we see that, we'll unmute you and we'll allow you to ask your question, and we'll try to find the right person to unmute to answer your question. Also, unprecedented, our first virtual meeting, and it's somebody's birthday today who's on the call, and I think we probably need to at least acknowledge him. I'm not going to sing the happy birthday, but I understand that Senator Justin Reedy is having a birthday today, so we want to say happy birthday to him. You guys can all do the little reaction thing where you do the applause if you want to. That'd be kind of cool. But happy birthday to you. Thank you so much for being with us here today. And if you want to send a chat to everybody, he'll be able to see it too. So thank you for that. And one last thing before we get into the questions, we have Commissioner Ed Rothstein with us, and I wanted to give him a couple minutes to give an update on a new local grant. If you guys remember, there was a local grant that came through our commissioners last week or the week before. I think it was $500,000. It was $1,250 to small businesses that fit into a certain actual category. And I believe that money has been spoken for. People applied, which is great. But one category of business that was not eligible, as I understand at that time, was a single-owned business or a sole proprietorship, somebody working out of their home. And I believe that this next bout or this next like round of funds is going to cover that. So I'm going to unmute Commissioner Rothstein.
Okay. Hey, Mike, I appreciate the opportunity to share. What I think is good news, albeit small, it's a small piece of the puzzle when it comes to helping small businesses. The phase, basically, it's a phase one, phase two. The phase one was about $500,000 that we allocate to small businesses in good standing Carroll County. In order to meet the $1,250 to each one of those businesses, the 500,000 was basically 400 businesses. We got 437 that are in good standing and deserve the 1250. So yesterday we allocated another 50,000 to round off that phase one for small business good standing Carroll County that are not sole proprietors or home-based businesses. Knowing that there are significant sole proprietors and home-based businesses out there that are being challenged, we pushed through another 200,000 directed towards those sole proprietors and or home-based businesses. The significant piece to this is that you have to be licensed, accredited or not, what it is, have an EIN date on where.
I hate to mute one of our commissioners, but your sound isn't coming through too well. But I think number one, we would like to really applaud you for for this plan, and also to encourage people. I believe they're going to work out the actual process where you can go ahead and apply for these grants maybe in the next few days. But you'll want to go to carrollbiz.org to look for the press releases on that. And from the chamber side, we'll put the information out there too. And it's important to us because we've got 100 members that are one employee only. So for us, it's big. Out of our 600 and some members, we've got 100. Okay, so what I want to do right now is I want to pass things over to Dana. But Dana, what I'm going to do is I see that Marcia Herbert's raised her hand. So I'm going to unmute her, let her ask her question, and then you can take things from there. Dana, I know you've got a question, but I think that might be the best way to do it. So on my screen here, if I can find Marcia Herbert, I found her. Let me mute myself.
All right. Can you all hear me? I really don't have a question, but I wanted to thank Dr. Lockhart and his staff for doing a terrific job during this unprecedented time. A shout out to all the educators. They've been working really hard in this new era of online teaching. And I'm sorry for the math teachers, but I've been teaching stacking. I'm back at it teaching. I'm out of retirement. And for all those students in Carroll County, they should have received a workbook. And CCPS has handed out thousands of meals over the last several weeks. And those people have worked tirelessly. And I am very concerned, of course, about graduations and proms. And we wait for the leadership of Dr. Salmon and the governor to help us move forward. So I just want to thank everyone for doing a fantastic job at the Carroll County Board of Education. Thank you.
Dana, I will hand things over to you now, okay? Except you're still muted, Dana.
Okay, sorry about that. So in order to start things off, I think what I'll do is shoot out a question and ask Senator Reedy if he would like to summarize for us, possibly. As Delegate Rose had mentioned, the governor has said that he was not going to work to enact any of the bills that carried an expense to the state with him or with them. And so I was hoping that maybe you could speak briefly about that. Give us an example of maybe a couple of bills that would apply to, and what you think the likelihood of that actually occurring is. And I'll let you go ahead and answer.
Sure. I think that number one, I do believe he will be. I don't have necessarily any inside information other than what he said, but I think the veto of Kerwin is imminent at some point here. He has until the end of this month to make decisions on. I think he has 30 days after he gets the bills, and so he got the bills on April 7th. Even though we adjourned earlier than that, they waited to give him the bills till April 7th, which I actually think was a gesture to sort of say, we know your hands are full right now. We won't start the clock on you having to make decisions until April 7th. But Kerwin, I think, is probably DOA. And what's interesting is right now in the next couple of years, we already had fully funded some implementation of some of the recommendations anyway. So you didn't actually have to pass it this year. You could have come back in January and then passed something, particularly once it became clear that this was going to be a major economic, meltdown, for lack of a better term. We hope it won't stay that way. I echo my colleagues, by the way, in saying I think that it's clear and it's going to be key that a path forward gets revealed hopefully in the coming days and weeks. It isn't that they're going to turn around next week and say, hey, everything's back open. But I do think I'm hopeful based on some of the things that we're trying to talk about behind the scenes and even some public things that we're going to hear more that by the end of the month about a plan and a path to at least start the process. And I know that's not what anybody on this call wants to hear, sort of vagary like that, but hopefully there's going to be some positive steps forward here. We're advocating for there to be, as quickly as possible, some level of change so that people can get back to work, even in a limited level. You're going to hear my clock here ding. But back to the vetoes of the bills. I think the bill that tries to the thing that tries to say that the governor has to can't have complete control over the budget. I think that's a thing that also will be on the veto chopping block. But the General Assembly, we pass lots of bills that have little price tags to them, or so-called little. They're not that little, actually. There could be millions of dollars. And there were a number of things this year that got through that mandate that the government spent $3 million more a year on this program, or $1 million more on this. There was funding for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, which I really love the Symphony Orchestra, but committing us to 4 or 5 years of funding an organization that has acknowledged that they have gotten their act together and are raising money to fund it. That just does not make sense to me that we would do that. So those kinds of items, when we look at the possibility of having a $2.5 to $3 billion budget deficit, if things don't turn around more quickly going into next year, we just don't have the choice. I mean, even if you think a program is a really good program, you just don't have the choice but to put a halt to a lot of it and start over. Now, what will be interesting is if the governor vetoes a number of bills, by the time we get to January, will the General Assembly come back and try to say, no, these are so important, we should raise taxes and sustain these vetoes? And I don't know the answer to that. It may depend partly on how bad this gets over the next couple of months and what the impact is. So I don't know if I answered your question completely, but I was trying to give you sort of a sense of what the governor's decision making on a lot of this, I believe, will be driven by the fact that, number one, there's some things that pass that he doesn't particularly like, that we don't like. But then there's also some things that even if he might normally just let it go into law without his signature, we cannot afford it. And every $1 million, and it sounds so silly with us talking here, but because this is $1 million is a lot of money. But in Annapolis, a lot of times $1 million here and there, people don't really give the kind of weight to it that they should. But it's really serious now. Every $500,000, $1 million, $2 million a year that you're mandating the state do really adds up.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Mike, since you can see the hands, and it doesn't look like I can, I think I'm going to flip it back to you to see if there are any questions.
Thanks. I don't see any questions right now, but I was given a tip that if you're on your phone, if you hit *9, I believe it'll raise your hand. So I've got a question, and I know there's probably no real answer to this, but somewhere there's a fine line behind saying we want to save lives, which everybody does, and I'm talking about the whole COVID-19 right now. And then the other people that say open everything up right now and let anybody get it. I would never say that. But what I would ask is, are they talking? And I guess they're going to start. But are they talking about the logic behind allowing some of the bigger box stores to be open? And I know they've been trying to cut back on how many people can go in there at any one time. But I mean, there was a time where you could go to every grocery store in town and hit all kinds of lines, and all the bigger box stores in town and every liquor store in town. But yet somebody like, let's say, Coffee Music on Main Street in Westminster had to be closed. And are they discussing some of these Main Street businesses, some of these other ones that are smaller businesses that could easily monitor how many people are allowed in the store, could easily spray things down when folks leave, and still keep people employed and still let people go out and about? So are they talking about that at this point? I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and looks like Delegate Rose is going to say something.
Well, you're covering a subject matter that I have been thinking about a lot and discussing with some of my colleagues quite a bit over the past several weeks. And I think, part of the problem is as we've drawn things down and made decisions, and I don't mean to sound like an armchair quarterback, and I know this is brand new to a lot of people, but as we enacted a lot of these things, I don't think it was always thought through completely, and there's a little bit of a lack of common sense to some of them, in my opinion. And again, I don't mean to be overly critical. However, we had different situations come up, and I'll use golf courses as an example. With one of the initial executive orders, that was one of the businesses that were shut down. And the reasoning behind it, when you read the executive order, if something paid an amusement tax, it was deemed non-essential and shut down. However, we had an inequity there that very much hurt Carroll County golf courses. We have all privately owned golf courses. However, municipal owned golf courses and county owned golf courses were allowed to remain open. So our businesses here in our county weren't allowed to be open, but yet someone could drive, to Howard County or Frederick, or I think there's several in Montgomery County. So that doesn't make any sense. And I had, businesses reaching out and saying, well, this isn't fair. If it's okay for them to be open, then the logic would say that ours could be open. And I think that we need to absolutely go back and look at some things that make common sense. Certain things like when you bring up the big box stores, you make absolute sense. There's absolutely no reason why some of our small businesses throughout the county can't be open in a safe way and make good decisions with having a plan in place, which I think Delegate Krebs mentioned. So I think we absolutely need to do this sooner rather than later. And it's something that is of great concern to me. In addition, other things such as I'll bring up as well, the ban on fishing, unless it's for food. Well, it's certainly you can fish and social distance from someone. And golf, you could certainly have golf and driving ranges open with social distancing. And those are just a couple more businesses that you can bring back online and let them remain open. You could be at the golf course, then pick up food from the clubhouse and take it home to your family. That's keeping someone employed. That's keeping their doors open. And I just think we've got to look at that. And I think it's an urgent situation that we need to look at those types of things. Limiting people in the stores and all, that's fine. At least they can stay open. So I think that the mindset just needs to change from this point moving forward to what can we do to open doors back up, get people back to work, and start to recover from what we're doing right now. This is not sustainable. And we just absolutely, in an urgent way, need to move forward. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. We do have a couple other questions. We have a comment. I'll go with one here from Mark Miller, Westminster Speed and Sound, an amazing store we have right here in Carroll, kind of a jewel of the state, to be honest. He says, is there any timeline for letting business owners know if they were approved for the county grant? And if approved, when it will get deposited? I think Commissioner Rothstein would be the one to try to answer that. Let's hope your sound works. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So it is my understanding, I just got off the phone with Economic Development, is that all checks that are processed for small businesses, this phase one, will be out by Friday. So some have been put in the mail yesterday. Another 100 are being put in the mail, I believe, today. And by Friday, all 437 should be out in the mail. And I just want to say that guidance for the phase two sole proprietors and home-based businesses should be available by Monday. They're meeting on Friday. An MOU has to be developed within the county, and guidelines should be provided by Monday for the second phase of the Small Business Fund.
Thank you, Commissioner Rothstein. Okay, we've got a hand raised from Marcia Herbert. I'm going to unmute you and let you talk.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Rothstein. That was one of my questions, but I wanted to get back to April. I'm wearing another hat now. I own Country Hill Farm. I have 25 horses that are sitting in my field, and I do group lessons, and we have horse shows. I understand horse shows because there's a lot of people, and we are not able to be that far apart for social distancing. But if I would do 3 or 4 of my students in my big indoor arena or outside, I would think that would be one of those types of businesses, such as golfing, that we are definitely apart from, that should be included, that we could get started back up. April, do you have any other comments on something like that?
Absolutely, Marcia, and I appreciate that question. And I 1000% agree with you. And I think that that's part of that conversation that we absolutely need to have. We need to look not from a position of no, but from a position of how can we make this work? And so that is just, I think, the posture that we need to be in. I think we need to get past this point of going further and further down, taking more and more away from folks, and trying to look at ways in a common sense manner to allow people to work, open their businesses in a way that is safe, and use facilities, throughout the county in a way that makes sense. We've got to stop. I think that thankfully, and we can all be very, very thankful that we're not seeing the giant surge. We have not become New York City. I don't believe we are going to become New York City, and that is a wonderful thing. I know that some of the areas closer to, say, Washington, D.C. are in a different position, and that's why I absolutely believe we need to do things in a regional way that makes sense. We are not Prince George's County. We are not Fairfax County. I'm concerned a bit about the discussion of the Baltimore, Washington, Virginia, everybody sort of coming online together, because that is really going to harm us in the more rural areas when we don't have that type of population and we're not seeing those same issues. So, and Virginia is talking about June 1st or June 10th. I think they're in lockdown until June 10th. And I just don't think that's sustainable. And I don't think that makes any sense whatsoever. So sorry for the long answer, but you're touching on something that I have been very much concerned with for a good couple of weeks. And I really think we need to start to turn that corner and start to work toward making immediate changes to help open things back up as much as we can.
Thank you so much for that answer. I think I may have missed some of the question that Mr. Mark Miller had. I'm going to read it again. And Commissioner Rothstein, this will be for you. Is there a timeline for letting business owners know if they were approved for the grant? We heard when it will get deposited, and I don't know if it's going to be direct deposited. It sounds like they're going to be checks that are going to go out. But I believe that Mark here is not certain if he's been approved for the grant yet. Is there a place he can go? Is there someone he can call? How will that work?
So there have been a handful that had not been approved. Those that were not eligible that did apply, and those that were not in good standing. If you're in question, you can call the Economic Development team at 410-386-2070. And Mike, you're right. It is not going to be direct deposit. They will be checks mailed to the businesses.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Mark, I know that you must be in good standing, so I'm not exactly certain what all the qualifications were, but I think your best bet is to make that phone call. And if you miss the number, you can always call me on my cell phone when we're done here. Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left. Are there any other questions that anybody would have? Go ahead and raise your hand, or it's like nobody's asking any more questions. Dana?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you can either raise your hand or you can type it into the chat window, and certainly Mike or I will see that as well.
Okay, I think I'm seeing at this point that we might be done with the questions. So if that's the case, I want to wrap things up here a little bit. As I'm wrapping it up, if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll see it. But again, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this. As I said, it's a brave new world where we're doing these type of events online. If we normally had the number of people that would have shown up for the luncheon, we probably would have had over 100. And if we maybe got this out sooner, we might have had that many today. I'm not quite certain, but I want to thank you again. I really want to thank our friends at CMC who make life really easy for us here in this community by helping to get the word out on so many things. These guys are awesome. I cannot say enough about them. So, and these are really trying times, obviously, very, very difficult for everyone. Just want to encourage folks. We're all going to get through this. It may not look exactly like it did before we went into it, but we're all going to get through it. And we need to stay positive. It can get me down too, trying to find out how do you redefine what we do here, just like every business owner has to. But let's work together. We're going to have a lot of actual webinars that we're going to come out with some good information on that. But shop local, keep your money local. I mean, now more than ever, that's a message I've always said, you can go to our site. We've got over 600 members, carrollcountychamber.org. And we always say we've got everyone from accountants to vineyards and everything in between. We got them all. And even if a business is closed right now, if there's like a retail business closed, a lot of them are being very creative in allowing you to shop from them. So don't go online and look up Amazon. You can go online and you can go to the website of some of the members that we have, some of the businesses that are here in Carroll, and find things you'd like to buy. And I guarantee that a lot of them are still making it possible. Buy it over the phone, buy it online, and they will mail it to you. Buy gift cards now. We're at a point where there's no time like the present to buy local gift cards. We've got a spot on our website now, carrollcountychamber.org, where we got a button you can click, and there's like 25 or more local restaurants who are members of ours who are open for delivery, for carryout. Take advantage of that. Help these folks out. Stay away from Amazon as much as you can right now. Shop from your local folks. Some of the upcoming events that we have coming, we have another online webinar like this on May 5th. It's our commissioner's update report. This will be from Commissioner Wance. So you go to our website, you can register for it, and then you'll get the LinkedIn information sent to you. That's going to be from 9 to 10 in the morning on May 5th. The Carroll Biz Challenge. We're taking applications. If there's ever been a time to fill out an application for the Carroll Biz Challenge, this is it. So many people are at home. They've got the ability. Don't get overwhelmed with all the problems. Look at it in that light. If you've got a business that you want to start up, as a possible blessing that you've got the time to put a really good application together. We've been doing this now this is our 8th year, and the grand prize is $5,000. That's a lot of money nowadays to help a business start. So we're taking applications through the end of May, and it's free to apply. So please make sure that you do that. As I said, we've got a lot of webinars that we're going to be coming out in the next month. We've got like 4 or 5 that we've got set. We just have to get the word out. Leadership Carroll, it's an amazing program that we do at the Chamber, and we've got 8 spots left for the class that starts in September. And I'm certain by the time that September comes around, COVID's going to be over and enough to the point where we can get together as a group for that. I'm counting on that. If not, we've got some plans to maybe rearrange a couple of the dates, but you can go to our website. You can apply for Leadership Carroll. We'd love to have you. If you missed this, if you tuned in late, this will be, I believe, on CMC's website, also possibly shown on Channel 19 again. I know it's going to be on their Facebook page. It's going to be on our page. Richard, is there anything you'd like to say from the standpoint of the folks who are really actually doing the show for us here? This is Richard Turner, Executive Director of the Community Media Center.
Well, I want to be able to say thanks to our staff who's been in really figuring out how to adjust to creating broadcast operations under the state of emergency and making sure that we got local information coming out and is available to our residents. It's really important, the work that's being done by the commissioners on Channel 24, as well as on their website and Facebook, YouTube, et cetera. Getting all that local information is really critical. So I encourage you to share it with others socially. Make sure that people know that this information is available and they're not just finding crazy stuff on social media that doesn't relate to what happens in our county. We've been increasing our coverage of the municipalities as well so that we've got all of those local voices happening. So just appreciate this opportunity to use tech and make sure our community stays informed and they can take care.
Thank you so much. And I think I'd like to ask Ms. Blum if there's anything she'd like to say to help us wrap things up here. Again, she's been the chair of our legislative committee for several years now, been on the committee for as long as I've been here. Dana, is there anything you'd like to say? Dana, unmute yourself.
There we go. Mike and I were competing with each other with the unmute button. So I just really wanted to say thank you to you, Mike, to our delegation, to the folks at CMC, certainly to everybody who took the time to log on today and join us, but also to my fellow committee members. We do a heck of a lot of work in a relatively short period of time, and we did it in even shorter period of time this year. While we obviously enjoy, for the most part, what we do, it is work. And I just want to say thanks for everybody for all of the work that they do and for the opportunity to do this. And again, I just want everybody to stay safe, stay well, and stay sane. Thank you.
Dana, thank you so much. So with that, we're going to finish up a little bit early here, give you all a chance to go out and get some local carryout food for lunch. Go to the Chamber's website and find that. Thank you all. See you again soon. Bye-bye.